You're standing in a small garage on the edge of Nagoya. The mechanic hasn't reached for a single expensive tool. He's holding a rag, a tire gauge, and a worn paper notebook. The car in front of him shows over 300,000 kilometers on the odometer, and it idles as smooth as the day it left the factory. That's the puzzle. That's the thing I could not let go of. 'Cause here's what I found. In Japan, ordinary cars routinely outlive ours by years, sometimes by a full decade, and it has almost nothing to do with the engineering. It comes down to a handful of quiet habits that top Japanese mechanics treat as gospel, and almost no one outside that country ever bothered to write down. These are not garage secrets locked behind a paywall. They are small, deliberate practices passed hand to hand in Japanese workshops for over 70 years. And there's one final trick, the 17th, that I traced all the way back to a maintenance notebook culture born from a law passed in 1951. When I finally understood it, I felt almost cheated that no one had told me sooner. It costs nothing. You can do it this week, in the driveway you already have, with the car already parked outside. I stood in that garage because I just paid a fortune to replace an engine that should have lasted far longer, and I wanted to know why the man in front of me never seemed to. So let me walk you through exactly what I uncovered, one piece at a time. The first thing I assumed was that Japanese engines were simply built better. That's the easy answer. It's the answer everyone gives. But it's wrong, and the moment I looked closely, it fell apart. Because the same engine, the exact same model, sold in North America and in Japan, dies far younger over here. Same steel, same factory, same design. If the metal were the secret, the results would match. They don't. So the difference isn't in the machine, the difference is in the hands that touch it every single day. And the very first habit I watched that mechanic perform, I had been doing backwards my entire life. He started the cold engine, waited maybe 30 seconds, and then drove off gently. He did not sit there letting it idle for 10 minutes in the cold the way I always had. I always thought idling was kind to the engine. I thought I was protecting it. In fact, I was slowly poisoning it. Here's what actually happens. A cold engine at idle runs rich, meaning it dumps extra fuel that doesn't fully burn. That raw fuel washes down the cylinder walls and strips away the thin film of oil that protects them. The Japan Automobile Federation, the group most drivers over there call JF, has been telling people for years that modern engines warm up fastest under a light driving load, not sitting still. 30 seconds to get the oil moving, then drive gently until the temperature needle lifts. That's it. I had wasted years of mornings idling in my driveway, wearing my engine down while telling myself I was being careful. One piece clicked into place, but it opened a bigger question. If something as basic as warming up the car had been quietly getting the opposite treatment where I live, how many other everyday habits had I gotten backwards? And why had no one corrected me? That question is where this stopped being curiosity and started feeling like something was being kept from me. Because the next habit had to do with money, and once money enters, someone always benefits from your ignorance. Watch how a Japanese driver fills the fuel tank. When the pump clicks off the first time, they stop. They do not squeeze in a little more. They do not top it off to a round number the way I used to, and there is a hard reason for it. Above the fuel tank sits a small part called the charcoal canister, part of the system that captures fuel vapor so it doesn't escape into the air. When you overfill past that first click, you push liquid fuel into a component built only for vapor. Over time it clogs, it fails, and the repair can run several $100s. Nobody at the fuel station is going to warn you about that, because the extra you squeeze in is extra they sell. That's the moment I realized these weren't just tips. These were the practices that quietly starve an entire replacement and repair economy of its easiest money. A car that lasts 20 years is a car that doesn't get bought again. A part that never clogs is a part no one gets to sell you. And the deeper I dug, the more I saw the same pattern. The habits that make a car last are almost always the habits that make someone else less money. So they simply stop teaching them. Let me give you the next one, because it's tied to the same tank you just stopped overfilling. Japanese mechanics have a rule about never letting the fuel level drop below roughly a quarter. To most people, that sounds like nervous overcaution. It isn't. Your fuel pump in most cars sits inside the tank, and it uses the fuel around it to stay cool. Run the tank down near empty over and over, and that pump runs hot and wears out early. Worse, an empty tank has more airspace, and in that airspace, moisture condenses overnight as the temperature drops. That water sinks into your fuel and works its way into the system. So the discipline is simple. Fill at the first click. Refill before you hit a quarter. 2 habits, no tools, no cost, and together they protect 2 separate systems that most drivers only think about on the day they fail. I felt the pieces starting to link together. Every trick pointed at the same buried idea that a car is not a disposable object you run into the ground, but something you tend, like a garden, in small daily amounts. But I still didn't understand where this mindset came from. Habits this consistent across an entire country don't appear by accident. Someone had to plant them. Therefore, I went looking for the root, and I found it in a law. In 1951, Japan passed the Road Transport Vehicle Act, and out of it grew the inspection system every Japanese driver knows is shaken. Here is why that matters to you, sitting where you are, in a country that has never heard the word. Undershaken, a car must pass a strict inspection, first after 3 years, then every 2 years after that, and the cost is steep, often well over $1,000 once you add the fees and required work. That system did something no advertising campaign ever could. It turned an entire nation into people who maintain relentlessly, because letting small problems slide means failing an expensive test. That pressure created a culture of the maintenance notebook, the little paper log I saw in that mechanic's hand. Every oil change, every fluid top-up, every belt, written down by date and by kilometer. Not in a computer, on paper, in the glove box, following the car for its whole life. And that notebook is the thread that leads to the final secret I promised you. But I'm not ready to hand it over yet, because to understand why it works, you first have to see the habits that surround it. So let me keep going, because the next few changed how I treat my own car completely. Here's one almost no one outside Japan does, and it stunned me. They rinse the underside of the car. Not the shiny paint everyone waxes for show, but the hidden underbelly, the frame and floor pan where salt and grit collect and quietly eat the metal from beneath. Rust doesn't usually kill a car from the top down. It kills it from the bottom up in the places you never look. A Japanese driver who lives near the coast or drives winter roads will take a garden hose and rinse under the car, especially along the back edges and the frame rails, washing away the salt before it can begin its slow work. It costs you water and 10 minutes, and it fights the single most common reason older cars get scrapped while their engines are still perfectly good. I had spent my whole life washing the part of the car people see and ignoring the part that actually decides how long the car survives. That's another repair the industry never has to fear you'll prevent, because almost no one thinks to prevent it. But rust led me to something even quieter, something happening inside the car while it sits parked, and this is where I want to stop and talk directly to you. Because maybe by now a voice in your head is saying this is all fine for Japan, for younger people, for someone with a bigger garage and more time and money than you. Maybe you're thinking your car is older, your driveway is small, your budget is tight, and none of this was meant for you. I want you to hear me clearly. This next part was built for exactly your situation. Every single thing I'm about to give you works on the car you own right now, in the space you already park it, with things you almost certainly already have in your home. No lift, no special tools, no trip to a dealer. Start with moisture, because moisture is the silent enemy inside a parked car. Damp air fogs your windows, breeds that musty smell, and quietly corrodes electrical contacts. Japanese drivers have used a dead simple fix for generations. A small cloth bag of desiccant, the same drying material that comes in those little packets with new shoes and electronics tucked under the seats. You can save those packets or buy a cheap box of drying crystals meant for closets and set them in the car. They pull the damp out of the air. When they're saturated, many types can be dried out in the sun and used again. Pennies, not dollars. Next, your tires, and this one puts money straight back in your pocket. Check the pressure when the tires are cold before you've driven, because heat from driving raises the reading and fools you. Underinflated tires drag, and that drag burns extra fuel and wears the tire edges bald far too soon. The correct number for your car isn't a guess. It's printed on a sticker inside the driver's door frame. Japanese mechanics check it about every 2 weeks. A tire gauge costs a few dollars and lasts a lifetime, and keeping your tires right can noticeably cut how much fuel you burn and add thousands of kilometers of life to a set of tires. That's real money, recovered from a habit that takes 3 minutes in your own driveway. Now the brakes, and this is a habit, not a purchase. Learn to ease off the accelerator early and let the engine slow the car as you approach a stop, rather than rushing up and stamping on the brake at the last second. Mechanics call the gentle version engine braking, and it spares your brake pads enormous wear. It also, over thousands of stops, saves fuel. You don't buy anything. You just change how your foot moves. And here's one more that lives entirely in your habits. Use your parking brake regularly, even when you're parked on flat ground. In most cars, that brake is connected to cables and mechanisms that seize up from rust and disuse if you never pull it. The people who only rely on leaving the car in park are the ones who find, years later, that the whole system has frozen solid and needs replacing. Pull it, release it, keep it alive. It costs nothing but a moment. Do you feel it? None of this needs Japan. None of it needs money. It needs attention, the one thing an entire industry is quietly betting you won't spend. And that's exactly what makes the next discovery sting. If you want every one of these habits laid out in one place, with the full context behind each one, I put it all into a book, Japanese Fix, along with deep Japanese and the full system, so you can go back to it any time, share it, and actually build the schedule the notebook method demands. The link is in the description. Take a look when you're done here. But I still didn't understand where this mindset came from, and that question pushed me even deeper, because I kept running into the same wall. Every mechanic in Japan seemed to know these things, and every driver seemed to at least half know them, yet the moment I looked at the guidance handed to ordinary drivers where I live, most of it was gone. Not hidden in some dramatic conspiracy, just quietly left out, replaced with a single message repeated everywhere. When something goes wrong, bring it in. Don't look, don't learn, don't touch, just pay. Think about who wins under that message. A driver who never opens the hood is a driver who can't catch a small leak before it becomes a ruined engine. A driver who never learns engine braking wears out brakes on schedule. A driver who tops off the tank and runs it to empty replaces pumps and canisters that never needed to fail. Every habit that was allowed to fade is a habit that used to save you money and now makes someone else money instead. The Japanese didn't keep these practices because they're more disciplined by nature. They kept them because that expensive inspection every 2 years made forgetting them painful, and because the knowledge stayed close to the ground in mechanics' notebooks and family habits, instead of being swept away by the message that the customer should stay ignorant. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it, and it made me want the last piece even more. So let me give you a few more before we get there, because they build the foundation the final secret rests on. Watch a careful Japanese owner start a cold engine, and you'll notice they don't switch on the headlights, the heater fan, the rear defroster, and everything else all at once in that first moment. They let the engine settle for a few seconds first, then bring the electrical loads on. That first instant of startup is when the battery and charging system work hardest, and piling every drain on at once strains a system already under its heaviest demand. Small thing, it adds years to a battery, and batteries are not cheap. Here's another, they listen. Every single drive, they listen to the car the way you'd listen to a friend's voice for the first sign of a cold. A new tick, a faint whine, a change in how the brakes feel underfoot, because a problem caught by ear on Monday is a cheap fix, and the same problem ignored until it's a bang or a smell on Friday is a catastrophe. The habit isn't mechanical skill. It's attention, again, the willingness to notice, and they check the ground. Before pulling out of a parking spot, a careful driver glances at the pavement where the car was sitting. A fresh drop of oil, a puddle of coolant, a smear of anything is the earliest possible warning of a leak, days or weeks before a warning light. It takes 1 second. Most people never do it once in their lives. Then there's the throttle and the airflow sensor, the parts that control how your engine breathes. Over the years, they gather a film of grime that makes the engine run rough, idle unevenly, and drink more fuel. Japanese mechanics clean these as routine maintenance with a specific cleaner and a soft touch long before they cause a breakdown. It's an afternoon's care that prevents the kind of rough running that sends most people to a repair shop convinced they need something replaced, and they take the car out. This one surprised me most. A car babied only on short, slow trips actually builds up carbon deposits inside because the engine never gets hot enough for long enough to burn that residue away. So the practice is to give the engine a proper, sustained run at higher speed now and then, safely and legally on an open road, letting it reach full operating temperature and clear itself out. The short trip only car and the never stretched engine are the ones that clog. A little exercise keeps the whole system clean. Every one of these circles the same truth. Small, constant attention beats expensive, occasional rescue. And now I can finally give you the piece that ties all of it together, the one I traced back to that notebook in the mechanic's hand. Here is the 17th trick, and I need you to understand where it comes from because that's what makes it real. When Japan built the shaken inspection system out of that 1951 law, it created something no other driving culture kept alive at the same scale. The Saibi Tekko, the maintenance record book, a physical paper log that lives with the car, not the owner, recording every act of care by date and by kilometer for the car's entire life. When the car is sold, the book goes with it, so the next owner can see exactly how it was treated. And decades of that habit revealed a pattern that Japanese mechanics came to trust more than any gauge or computer. The secret isn't any single repair, the secret is the interval, the rhythm. They discovered that a car maintained on a steady written schedule outlasts an identical car maintained by memory and mood by years, because the human memory always overestimates how recently it did something. You think you changed that oil 8 months ago. The book says 14. That gap is where engines quietly die. So here is what you actually do, and you can start today with a notebook that costs almost nothing. Keep a written log in your glove box. Every time you change the oil, top a fluid, rotate the tires, replace a belt or a battery, write the date and the exact odometer reading. Nothing else. Just those two numbers and what you did. Then, and this is the part the Japanese system forces, and the rest of us never do, you set the next action by the number, not by feeling. Oil every so many kilometers, written down in advance. When the odometer reaches it, you act, no matter how recent it feels. That single change, tracking by written interval instead of by memory, is the closest thing there is to the actual reason those Japanese cars crossed 300,000 kilometers still running sweet. Not superior steel, a superior schedule, kept on paper, honored without exception. The notebook I saw in that garage wasn't a formality. It was the whole answer, sitting in plain sight, and I'd walked past its equivalent in every glove box I'd ever owned. The knowledge was never lost. Exactly. It was preserved by a nation that made forgetting expensive, kept alive in mechanics' hands and paper logs, while the rest of us were quietly taught that the car keeps its own secrets and we should just pay when they surface. It doesn't. The record is the secret, and now it's yours. I think about that mechanic in Nagoya more than I expected to. He wasn't doing anything a person your age or mine couldn't do. He was simply refusing to forget and writing it down so he couldn't. Everything I chased across records and repair bays and old laws came back to that one humble act. And I think that's why this matters to you specifically. You're the kind of person who heard the easy answer that Japanese cars are just built better and felt in your gut it wasn't the whole truth. You clicked because you suspected something simple had been buried under something expensive. You were right. It had been, and you just dug it back out. So let me ask you one thing. And I really do want your answer. Of everything here, which habit did you realize you'd been doing backwards your whole life? Was it the idling in the cold driveway, like me? Or was it topping off the tank past that first click? Tell me in the comments right now in one line, because I read them and I want to know which one hit hardest. And if some part of you feels like you just recovered something that was quietly taken from all of us, then come with me. This channel exists to dig these forgotten practices back out one at a time and hand them back to the people they were always meant to serve. Subscribe, because the next thing I traced is even stranger. It's the reason certain Japanese households keep a car running well past 20 years on a fraction of what the rest of us spend, and it starts with a single overlooked fluid that almost everyone forgets exists until the day it destroys their transmission. I found where that habit came from too, and I can't wait to show you. If you found even one of those habits useful, stay close. This video gave you the overview, but inside my membership, the Quiet Wisdom Circle, I walk you through the deeper version, habit by habit. In there, you can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. A real person? You belong with us? Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime. No risk.